The gunshot echoing across the dusty valley was the first sound Katherine Davis heard when she woke that fateful morning in 1879, unaware that her life was about to change forever. She bolted upright in her narrow bed, the worn quilt falling to her waist as her heart hammered against her ribs. Outside her small homestead, the Montana Territory sunrise painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, beautiful and indifferent to the chaos unfolding beneath it. Katherine threw off the quilt and hurried to the window, her long nightgown tangling around her ankles. Through the smudged glass, she could see a lone rider approaching her property, dust billowing behind his horse. Her fingers instinctively sought the rifle she kept propped against the wall, a necessity for a woman living alone on the frontier. At 26, Katherine had learned the hard way that the West gave nothing freely. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 3 years, taken by a fever that swept through their small mining town. She'd been left with their struggling cattle ranch, a mountain of debt, and 2 young children to raise alone. The bank had been threatening foreclosure for months, and the drought had killed half her herd. The burden of survival weighed on her shoulders like stones in a sack, growing heavier with each passing day. She dressed quickly, her fingers fumbling with the buttons of her faded blue dress. In the adjoining room, she could hear her children stirring: Emma, age 7, and Daniel, barely 5. They didn't need to see their mother wielding a rifle at dawn. "Stay inside," she called to them, her voice steadier than she felt. "Emma, watch your brother." Katherine stepped onto the porch, rifle raised, her auburn hair whipping across her face in the morning breeze. The rider was closer now, and she could make out the broad-brimmed hat, the confident posture in the saddle, the glint of a badge on his chest. "That's far enough," she called out when he was within earshot. "State your business." The man pulled his horse to a stop and raised both hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. "Madam, I'm not looking for trouble." His voice carried across the yard, deep and clear. "Name's Adam Calloway, Deputy Marshal out of Helena." Katherine didn't lower her rifle. "What brings a marshal to my door at this hour, Deputy Calloway?" "Tracking outlaws," he replied, slowly lowering his hands. "Barton gang. Shot up a bank in Silver Creek yesterday. Thought I heard gunfire from this direction." His eyes, keen and perceptive even from a distance, scanned her property. "Everything all right here?" Katherine hesitated. The Barton gang was notorious throughout the territory, ruthless men who left nothing but sorrow in their wake. "I heard a shot, but not on my land." Adam Calloway nodded slowly, then gestured toward her house. "Mind if I water my horse, madam?" "Been riding since before dawn." Something about his steady gaze made Katherine lower her rifle slightly. She nodded, the tension in her shoulders easing a fraction. "Water pumps by the barn, but I'll be watching." As Calloway dismounted, Katherine took the measure of him. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to handling himself in difficult situations. His clothes were trail-worn but neat dusty boots, dark trousers, and a faded blue shirt beneath a leather vest. The badge on his chest caught the morning light. He led his horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding, to the pump and began working the handle. "Fine piece of land you have here," he remarked, glancing around. "You running it alone?" "That's not your concern, Marshal," Katherine replied, but her voice lacked conviction. The truth was etched in the premature lines around her eyes, in the calluses on her hands, in the exhaustion that seemed to seep from her very being. Before he could respond, the door behind her creaked open and Emma's small face appeared. "Mama, who's that man?" "Just a traveler, sweetheart." "Go back inside with Daniel." But Emma, always curious, slipped past her mother and stood on the porch, her nightgown fluttering in the breeze. "Are you a real lawman?" she asked, eyes wide with wonder at the sight of Calloway's badge. The deputy smiled, and Katherine was struck by how it transformed his face, softening the hard lines carved by sun and duty. "Yes, miss, I surely am. Deputy Marshal Adam Calloway at your service." He tipped his hat to the child. "My papa had a badge too," Emma said, "before he went to heaven." Katherine felt her throat tighten. "Emma, please, your papa was a lawman?" Calloway asked gently. Emma shook her head. "He was a sheriff's deputy in Butte. Mama has his badge in her special box." Understanding dawned in the deputy's eyes as he looked at Katherine. "You're Thomas Davis's widow." Katherine stiffened. "You knew my husband, not personally, but his reputation. Good man from all accounts." Calloway finished watering his horse and secured the reins to the pump. "Mrs. Davis, I don't mean to impose, but I could use some information about the area." "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Katherine hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Emma, go help your brother get dressed." Once the child had disappeared inside, she gestured to the porch steps. "We can talk here." As Calloway sat down, keeping a respectful distance, Katherine remained standing, the rifle still in her hands. "What do you want to know? Have you seen any strangers passing through?" "4 men heavily armed, one with a scar across his cheek." She shook her head. "No one's been by in over a week, except the man from the bank." Her voice hardened at the mention. "Mr. Hargrove, coming to remind me that I'm 3 months behind on the loan payments." Calloway's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "Times are hard all over." "Harder for some than others," Katherine replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. She glanced over her shoulder at the house where her children waited. "I've got 20 head of cattle left, half of what we started with, the well's running dry, the roof leaks when it rains. And the bank wants their money regardless." She hadn't meant to reveal so much, especially to a stranger, but the words tumbled out like water through a broken dam. She squared her shoulders, embarrassed by her outburst. "You'll not find the Barton gang here, Deputy. I suggest you continue your search elsewhere." But Calloway was looking past her, his body suddenly tense. "Mrs. Davis," he said quietly, "I think you might be wrong about that." Katherine turned to follow his gaze. In the distance, a cloud of dust rose on the horizon, riders approaching, at least 3 or 4 from what she could tell. Her heart sank. In that moment, she knew with certainty who was coming. "Get inside," Calloway said, rising to his feet. "Lock the doors and take your children to the back room." "This is my property, and those are the men I've been hunting." He cut her off, his voice firm but not unkind. 4 murderers who won't hesitate to kill a woman or her children. Please, Mrs. Davis." Something in his eyes' urgency mixed with genuine concern made Katherine nod. She hurried inside, locking the door behind her. Emma and Daniel were in the kitchen, the little boy still in his nightclothes. "Mama, what's happening?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Nothing to worry about," Katherine lied, herding them toward the bedroom. "We're going to play a game. We need to be very quiet and stay in the back room until I say it's safe to come out." Once the children were secured, Katherine retrieved her husband's revolver from the box beneath her bed, the same box that held his badge, his pocket watch, and the letters he'd written her during their courtship. The weight of the gun was unfamiliar in her hand, but she checked that it was loaded, just as Thomas had taught her. Through the window, she could see Calloway positioning himself behind the water trough, his own revolver drawn. He looked calm, focused, like a man who had faced danger many times before. The riders drew closer, and Katherine's breath caught as she made out their features. 4 men, dusty and trail-worn, with hard eyes and weapons displayed prominently. The one in front, tall, with a shock of white blonde hair and a vicious scar running from eye to jaw, could only be Jacob Barton himself. They pulled to a stop in the yard, and Barton's voice carried clearly through the morning air. "I know you're out there, lawman. We saw you ride this way." Calloway remained silent, not revealing his position. "Come on out, and maybe we won't burn this nice little ranch to the ground," Barton continued, "with the woman and her brats inside." Katherine's blood ran cold. They'd been watching, had seen Emma on the porch. "Just me and you, Barton," Calloway finally called out. "Let's settle this without involving innocent people." Barton's laugh was like the rasp of a blade on stone. "Ain't nothing innocent in this world, Marshal. You want me? Come and get me." What happened next unfolded in a blur of motion and sound. One of Barton's men spotted Calloway and fired. The deputy returned fire with deadly accuracy, and the outlaw tumbled from his saddle. The remaining gang members scattered, taking cover behind the barn and corral. Katherine watched in horror as bullets splintered wood and kicked up dust around Calloway's position. He was outnumbered, with limited cover. Without thinking, she moved to the front window, raised her husband's revolver, and fired at the outlaw creeping along the side of the barn toward Calloway's blind spot. Her shot went wide, but it was enough to startle the man, making him break cover. Calloway seized the opportunity, and a moment later the outlaw fell, 2 down, 2 remaining, Barton and his last man. They were pinned down behind the corral now, occasional shots keeping Calloway from advancing. "Mrs. Davis," Calloway called out, "stay inside." But Katherine knew the deputy couldn't cover both angles alone. If either outlaw circled around the back of the property, they'd have a clear path to the house to her children. She couldn't allow that. Heart pounding, she moved to the back door, checking that it was secure before positioning herself at the window with a clear view of the rear approach to the house. Minutes stretched like hours as she waited, every sense alert for movement. The crack of gunfire continued from the front of the property, then suddenly fell silent. Katherine held her breath, straining to hear anything that might tell her what had happened. Had Calloway been hit? Were the outlaws advancing? A shadow moved at the edge of her vision, someone creeping along the tree line that bordered her property. Not Barton, but his remaining henchman, rifle in hand, making his way toward the back of the house. Katherine steadied her hand on the windowsill, aimed carefully as Thomas had taught her, and squeezed the trigger. The outlaw stumbled, clutching his leg, but kept coming. She fired again, and this time he fell and didn't rise. From the front of the house came a final exchange of shots, then silence. Katherine waited, her heart in her throat, until a voice called out, "Mrs. Davis, it's over." She rushed to the front room, peering cautiously through the window. Calloway stood in the yard, blood seeping from a gash on his arm, but otherwise intact. At his feet lay Jacob Barton, motionless. Katherine unlocked the door and stepped onto the porch, still gripping the revolver. "The children are safe," Calloway assured her. "All the Barton gang are accounted for." She sagged against the doorframe, the revolver suddenly too heavy to hold. "I shot a man," she whispered. "By the tree line." Calloway nodded. "You did what you had to do to protect your family." He winced as he tried to adjust his hat, the movement pulling at his wounded arm. "You're hurt." Katherine straightened, years of tending to injuries on the ranch kicking in. "Come inside, I'll see to that arm." As she guided him to the kitchen table, she called out to the children that it was safe to come out, though she positioned Calloway so his injured arm was hidden from their view. Emma and Daniel emerged wide-eyed but unharmed, staring curiously at the deputy. "Did you catch the bad men, mister?" Daniel asked, his small face solemn. Calloway nodded gravely. "Yes, son, I did, with your mama's help." Katherine busied herself gathering bandages and her small supply of medicinal items, trying to steady her trembling hands. "Emma, take your brother and collect eggs from the henhouse, please. And don't go past the barn." Once the children were gone, she helped Calloway remove his vest and roll up his sleeve. The bullet had grazed his upper arm, leaving a deep furrow that bled freely but didn't appear life-threatening. "You're lucky," she said, cleaning the wound with whiskey from her meager stores. Calloway hissed through his teeth at the sting but didn't pull away. "Luck had little to do with it. You're quite a shot, Mrs. Davis." Katherine's hands paused in their work. "My husband taught me." Said a woman alone needed to know how to defend herself. She resumed bandaging his arm. "He didn't know how right he would be." "He'd be proud of you." Calloway's voice was soft. "Not many would have had the courage to do what you did today." She tied off the bandage and stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "I should check on the children." Before she could move away, Calloway gently caught her wrist. "Mrs. Davis, Katherine, I want to thank you. You saved my life today." The sound of her given name on his lips startled her. It had been so long since anyone had called her anything but Mrs. Davis or Madam. She pulled her hand free, flustered. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said with certainty. "They wouldn't have." The day passed in a blur of activity. Calloway sent a rider from the nearest homestead to bring the sheriff and deal with the bodies of the Barton gang. Katherine kept the children occupied inside while the grim work was conducted, trying to shield them from the aftermath of violence on their land. By nightfall, the property had been cleared, statements taken, and the sheriff departed with promises to return the next day with papers for Katherine to sign. Calloway had been asked to remain as a witness, and though Katherine had initially been reluctant to have a stranger stay in her home, The events of the day had forged a tentative trust between them. After the children were asleep, Katherine found Calloway sitting on her porch steps, staring up at the vast canopy of stars. She hesitated in the doorway, then stepped outside, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. "Deputy," she acknowledged, sitting beside him but maintaining a proper distance. "Adam," he corrected her. "After what we've been through today, I think we can dispense with formalities, don't you?" Katherine allowed herself a small smile. "I suppose we can, Adam." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the night sounds of the prairie surrounding them, crickets chirping, the occasional hoot of an owl, the soft lowing of cattle in the distant pasture. "What will you do now?" she finally asked. "Return to Helena," Adam nodded slowly. "Eventually. There'll be paperwork, a hearing about the shooting." He glanced at her. "You'll need to testify," Katherine sighed. "Another burden. You carry too many of those already," he observed quietly. She looked at him, startled by his perception. "That's the way of things out here. Especially for a woman alone. It doesn't have to be." His eyes, silver in the moonlight, held her steadily. "There are people willing to help if you'd let them." Katherine looked away, uncomfortable with his insight and the unexpected warmth it kindled within her. "I've managed this far." "At what cost?" Adam's voice remained gentle, but his words pierced through her carefully constructed walls. "I see it in your eyes, Katherine, the weight you're carrying, the ranch, the children, the debt, it's crushing you." "What choice do I have?" she demanded, suddenly angry. "Should I give up, let the bank take our land, move to town and do what, take in laundry, beg for charity?" She stood abruptly. "I won't dishonor Thomas's memory that way." Adam rose as well, his height making her tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Is that what you think he'd want? For you to work yourself to death trying to save a failing ranch?" Katherine flinched as if he'd struck her. "You didn't know him. You don't know what he wanted." "I know he loved you," Adam said, his voice softening. "No man who loves a woman wants to see her suffer even after he's gone." Tears burned behind Katherine's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "It doesn't matter. In 3 weeks the bank will foreclose unless I can make the payment. 20 years of Davis family history gone." Her voice broke on the last word. Adam was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What if there was another way?" "What do you mean, the reward?" he explained. "For the Barton gang, $500 from the territorial government plus whatever the banks they robbed put up. It could be as much as $2,000. Katherine's breath caught. $2,000. It was a fortune enough to pay off the bank and make essential repairs to the ranch, and you helped capture them," Adam continued. "By rights, part of that reward should be yours." Hope, fragile and tenuous, flickered to life inside her. "They'd never give a reward to a woman." The corner of Adam's mouth lifted in a half-smile. "They will if I say you were deputized to assist me, and I do have the authority to deputize civilians in an emergency." Katherine stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Why would you do that for me?" Adam's expression grew serious. "Because you deserve it. Because you risked your life not just to protect your children but to help me. And because," he hesitated, then continued more softly, "because I know what it's like to carry burdens alone." The night air seemed to grow still around them, filled with unspoken understanding. For the first time since Thomas's death, Katherine felt something other than grief and anxiety stirring within her, a tentative spark of connection to this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate for the lifeline he was offering. Adam nodded, and for a brief moment his hand reached out as if to touch hers, then withdrew. "Get some rest, Katherine. Tomorrow will be a new day." As she lay in bed that night, Katherine found her thoughts returning again and again to Adam Calloway. His steady presence, his quiet strength, the way he'd fought to protect her family without hesitation. She told herself it was merely gratitude she felt, nothing more. She had no room in her life for such complications, especially not with a lawman whose life kept him constantly in danger, constantly moving from one town to another. Yet when she finally drifted into sleep, her dreams were filled with images of dark hair and silver-gray eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, she slept without nightmares. The following days brought changes to the Davis ranch. True to his word, Adam spoke with the territorial judge about Catherine's role in capturing the Barton gang. The judge, impressed by her courage, agreed to allocate a portion of the reward money to her $1,500, more than enough to satisfy the bank and provide a cushion for the coming months. Mr. Hargrove from the bank arrived expecting to discuss foreclosure proceedings and left with his payment in full, his expression a mixture of surprise and grudging respect. Katherine had never felt such satisfaction as she did watching him ride away, the deed to her ranch secure once more. Adam remained at the ranch during this time, ostensibly to recover from his wound and complete his official reports. But Katherine noticed how he found ways to make himself useful mending the corral fence, patching the leaky roof, showing Daniel how to care for the horses. The children had taken to him immediately, especially Emma, who followed him around asking endless questions about life as a lawman. Katherine told herself his help was temporary, that soon he would return to Helena and his duties. She shouldn't grow accustomed to his presence, to the way the burden seemed lighter with him there to share it. Yet each morning when she woke to the sound of him splitting wood for the stove or the rumble of his laughter as he played with the children, something inside her grew warmer, more hopeful. A week after the shootout, Adam received a telegram from Helena. Katherine watched his face as he read it, trying to gauge its contents from his expression. "Bad news?" she asked when he folded the paper and tucked it into his pocket. "Not exactly," he replied. "My superior wants me back in Helena by the end of the month. There's a new assignment." Katherine nodded, ignoring the pang of disappointment. "Of course, you have responsibilities." "Yes." Adam seemed to hesitate, then added, "But I have 2 weeks before I need to leave." 2 weeks. 14 days that stretched before her like a gift and a torment combined. Time enough to finish the most pressing repairs to the ranch. Time enough to grow even more attached to a man who would ultimately ride away. "You've already done more than enough," Katherine said, keeping her voice neutral. "You should rest, let your arm heal properly." Adam smiled, seeing through her attempt at distance. "I'll rest when the work is done. In the meantime, I believe I promised Daniel I'd teach him how to fish today." His eyes held hers. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." It would be easier if he left now, Katherine thought. Easier to return to the life she knew, difficult as it was, than to experience these glimpses of what might have been of what it felt like to share her burdens with someone who understood. But looking at his face, open and honest in the morning light, she couldn't bring herself to send him away. "Daniel would be disappointed," she said at last. "He's been looking forward to it all week." Adam's smile widened. "Just Daniel." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks and turned away to hide it. "The creek's best for fishing in the morning. You should get started if you want to catch anything worth cooking." His chuckle followed her as she retreated to the house, and she pressed a hand to her heart, willing it to stop its foolish racing. She was a widow with responsibilities, not a young girl with time for romance. Whatever she might feel for Adam Calloway, it could lead nowhere. In 2 weeks, he would be gone, and she would be alone again with her children and her ranch. But for the first time, the thought of being alone felt not just difficult, but unbearable. The fishing expedition was a success, with Daniel proudly bringing home 3 trout for dinner. Adam taught him how to clean them, and Katherine watched from the kitchen window as her son listened intently to every instruction, his small face serious with concentration. Adam was patient and encouraging, praising the boy's efforts without coddling him. That evening, as they sat around the table enjoying the fruits of Daniel's labor, Emma asked the question Katherine had been dreading. "Are you going to stay with us forever, Mr. Adam?" The table fell silent. Katherine kept her eyes on her plate, not daring to look up. "I can't stay forever, Emma," Adam replied gently. "I have a job that takes me to different places." "But you like it here," Emma persisted. "And you like Mama, I can tell." "Emma," Katherine said sharply. "That's enough. It's all right," Adam said. His eyes, when Katherine finally met them, were warm with something that made her breath catch. "Yes, Emma, I do like it here, and I like your Mama very much." "Then why can't you stay?" Daniel asked, his lower lip trembling slightly. Adam considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Sometimes adults have responsibilities that mean we can't always do what we want. I gave my word that I would do this job, and keeping your word is important. Your mama taught you that, right? Both children nodded reluctantly. But, Adam continued, glancing at Katherine, that doesn't mean I can't come back to visit if your mama doesn't mind. All eyes turned to Katherine, and she felt her cheeks warm under their collective gaze. We would like that, she said finally, if your duties permit. Adam's smile held a promise that made her heart flutter traitorously in her chest. Then it settled. Later, after the children were in bed, Katherine found Adam on the porch again. It had become their nightly ritual, these quiet conversations under the stars, where they spoke of their pasts, their hopes, the challenges they'd faced. Katherine had told him about meeting Thomas at a church social when she was 17, about their early struggles to establish the ranch, about the devastating fever that had taken him so suddenly she'd barely had time to say goodbye. Adam, in turn, had shared his own story growing up the son of a Texas Ranger, losing his mother young, following in his father's footsteps as a lawman. He'd been married briefly in his early 20s, but his wife had left him after a year, unable to bear the constant worry of being married to a man who might not come home each night. Tonight, Katherine sensed a shift in the air between them, a tension that hadn't been present before. Adam seemed pensive, staring out at the darkened landscape with an intensity that made her wonder what he was seeing. "Penny for your thoughts, Deputy," she said lightly, settling beside him on the steps. He turned to her, his expression serious. "I've been thinking about what happens when these 2 weeks are over." Katherine's heart sank, but she kept her voice steady. "You return to Helena, take on your new assignment, and then," she shrugged, attempting nonchalance, "then life goes on as before for both of us." Adam shook his head slowly. "I don't think it can, Katherine, not for me anyway." "What do you mean?" she asked, barely above a whisper. He shifted to face her more directly. "I mean that in the span of a week, you and your children have become important to me, more important than I expected. The thought of riding away from here, not knowing when I might see you again." He trailed off, then continued more softly. "It doesn't sit right." Katherine's pulse quickened, but caution kept her response measured. "Adam, we barely know each other, don't we?" he challenged gently. "I know that you're the strongest woman I've ever met, that you love your children fiercely enough to face down outlaws for them, that despite everything life has thrown at you, you haven't become bitter or hard, that you still find joy in small things, a sunset, a well-cooked meal, your daughter's laugh." His words stripped away her defenses, leaving her vulnerable in a way she hadn't been since Thomas's death. "And what do I know about you, truly? That you're kind to my children, that you're good with a gun in your hands, that you've been honorable in your dealings with me." She paused, gathering courage. "That when you're near, I feel less alone than I have in 3 years. Adam's expression softened, and he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand covered hers where it rested on the step between them. "Katherine, I'm not asking for promises. I know it's too soon for that, but I'd like the chance to come back here to see if what I'm feeling, what I think we both might be feeling, could grow into something real." The warmth of his hand on hers seemed to spread through her entire body. It would be so easy to lean into that warmth, to let herself believe in the possibility he was offering. But fear held her back, fear of loss, of change, of opening herself to pain again. "What about your job?" she asked. "You said yourself, a lawman's life is dangerous and unpredictable." "It is," he acknowledged, "but it doesn't have to be forever. My father retired from ranging when I was 16, took up carpentry. I've got skills beyond wearing a badge." His thumb traced a gentle pattern on the back of her hand. "I'm not Thomas, Katherine. I know I can't replace him in your heart or your children's memories. I wouldn't want to try, but maybe there's room for something new alongside what you had with him." Katherine looked down at their joined hands, then up at the star-filled sky. She thought of Thomas, of the life they'd built together, the dreams they'd shared. She'd loved him deeply, completely. His death had left a void she'd never expected to fill. Yet here was Adam, offering not to fill that void, but to help her create something different. "Not a replacement, but a new chapter. I'm afraid," she admitted finally. "Not just of losing someone again, though that terrifies me, but of changing what Thomas and I built, of somehow betraying his memory." Adam was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "If the situations were reversed, if you had died and Thomas was sitting here now, what would you want for him?" The question pierced straight to her heart. She closed her eyes, imagining Thomas alone with their children, struggling to keep everything afloat. The answer came with absolute clarity. "I'd want him to be happy, to find someone who cared for him and the children, someone who would share his burdens." When she opened her eyes, Adam was watching her with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "Then maybe that's what Thomas would want for you too." Katherine felt tears well up, but they weren't tears of grief or guilt. They were tears of release, of permission granted to herself to move forward. "2 weeks isn't very long," she said softly. Adam's smile held understanding and patience. "We have time, and Helena isn't so far that I couldn't ride out on my days off, if that's something you'd welcome." Katherine turned her hand beneath his, lacing their fingers together in silent answer. For the first time in years, the future held something beyond mere survival. It held possibility. The remaining days of Adam's stay passed too quickly. Each morning, Katherine woke with a mixture of anticipation and dread, joy in the day ahead, sorrow for the approaching farewell. Adam threw himself into ranch work with enthusiasm, completing repairs that had languished for months. Under his guidance, Daniel learned to ride properly, his confidence growing visibly. Emma discovered a talent for sketching when Adam gave her a small notebook and pencil he'd purchased in town. Katherine found herself watching him when he wasn't aware the way he moved with easy grace, despite his size, the gentleness of his hands when bandaging a calf's injured leg, the lines at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he laughed. She cataloged these details, storing them away for the days ahead when he would be gone. They were careful with each other, maintaining propriety despite the growing attraction between them. Their only moments alone came in the evenings on the porch, where conversation flowed freely but physical contact remained limited to occasional. Brief touches his hand on hers, her fingers straightening his collar, shoulders brushing as they sat side by side. On the night before his departure, after the children were asleep, Adam found Katherine in the barn. She was brushing down her mare, the rhythmic strokes a comfort against the ache building in her chest at the thought of tomorrow's goodbye. "Need some help?" he asked, leaning against the stall door. Katherine shook her head, not trusting her voice just yet. Adam entered anyway, taking a second brush from the shelf and moving to the horse's other side. They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the soft swish of bristles against coat and the occasional stamp of the mare's hoof. "The children made me something," Adam said finally. "A going-away present." Katherine smiled despite her sadness. "They've been very secretive about it." "A map," he explained, "of the trail from Helena to here, with landmarks they've drawn themselves, so I won't get lost on my way back." The simple faith of children that he would return, that this separation was temporary, brought a lump to Katherine's throat. "They've grown attached to you, and I to them." Adam set down his brush and moved around the horse to stand before her. "To all of you." Katherine's hands stilled. She looked up to find his eyes serious, intent on hers. "Adam, I know what I'm feeling, Katherine," he said quietly. "These 2 weeks have shown me what could be possible, what kind of life we might build together, given time." Her heart thundered in her chest. "You hardly know me." "I know enough." He took the brush from her hands and set it aside. "I know you're stubborn and proud and fiercely independent. I know you love deeply and protect what's yours with everything you have. I know that when you smile, really smile, it lights up your whole face in a way that takes my breath away." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You make me sound like some kind of heroine from a dime novel." Adam chuckled. "No heroine I've read about could outshoot you or run a ranch half as well." His expression grew serious again. "I'm not asking for answers tonight, just for you to think about possibilities." "What possibilities?" she asked, though she knew the answer already. A life shared instead of divided. Burdens carried together instead of alone. His hand came up to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. "Joy multiplied because there's someone to share it with." Katherine closed her eyes briefly at his touch. When she opened them, she found the courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her. "And your job, would you truly be content to give up being a lawman?" "Not immediately," Adam admitted, "but I've been thinking about what comes next." The territorial governor has offered me a position as a marshal, with more administrative duties and less time in the field. It would mean being based in Helena permanently with regular hours. Helena is still a day's ride from here, Katherine pointed out. Adam nodded. It is, but it's a start. And eventually, well, there are ranches closer to Helena or positions for experienced lawmen in the towns nearby. His eyes held hers. I'm not asking you to uproot your life overnight, just to consider that we might find a way to bridge the distance with time. Catherine's practical nature asserted itself. And in the meantime, occasional visits when your duties permit, letters that take weeks to arrive. For now, he agreed. It's not ideal, I know, but Katherine. He took her hands in his. Some things are worth waiting for, worth working toward. The sincerity in his voice, the warmth of his hands around hers, the steady certainty in his eyes all combined to break down the last of her resistance. Standing there in the dimly lit barn, surrounded by the familiar smells of hay and horses, Katherine allowed herself to acknowledge the truth she'd been fighting for days. She was falling in love with Adam Calloway. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it filled her with a strange, peaceful certainty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever adjustments they would need to make, the connection between them was worth exploring. I'd like to write to you, she said softly. And yes, visits would be welcome, very welcome. The smile that spread across Adam's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. May I? He began, then hesitated. Katherine, may I kiss you, just once before I go, something to remember during the weeks ahead. Her heart skipped a beat. She nodded, unable to form words past the emotion tightening her throat. Adam stepped closer, one hand rising to cup her cheek with exquisite gentleness. His eyes, silver gray in the lantern light, searched hers for any sign of hesitation. Finding none, he lowered his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Katherine didn't. Instead, she lifted her face to his, and when their lips finally met, she felt a surge of warmth that spread from the point of contact throughout her entire body. The kiss was tender, respectful, but with an underlying current of passion that promised more someday when they were ready. When they parted, Adam rested his forehead against hers, his breath mingling with her own. I'll come back, he whispered, as often as I can. Katherine nodded, her eyes closed, committing this moment to memory. I'll be here. In the morning, Adam's departure was somber but not devastating. The children clung to him, extracting multiple promises of return visits and letters addressed specifically to them. Katherine maintained her composure, though her heart ached as she watched him saddle his horse and secure his belongings. As he prepared to mount, Adam turned to her one last time. The children had run ahead to the house to fetch the special map they'd made him, leaving the adults a brief moment of privacy. This isn't goodbye, he said, his voice low and intense. It's just until next time, Katherine nodded, fighting back tears. Be careful, Adam. The territory isn't any safer than it was 2 weeks ago. I will. He reached out to take her hand, pressing something into her palm. I want you to have this. Katherine looked down to find a small silver star in her hand, not his official badge, but a smaller version, the kind sometimes given to commemorate service. It was my father's, Adam explained. He gave it to me when I first pinned on a badge. Said it would remind me that I never faced danger alone, that he was with me in spirit. His fingers closed around hers, folding them over the token. Now it's yours, a reminder that you're not alone either, Katherine, not anymore. The simple gift and the meaning behind it broke through her careful control. A tear slipped down her cheek. Thank you. Adam brushed the tear away with his thumb. I'll be back before the first snow, he promised, and I'll write as soon as I reach Helena. We'll be waiting, she whispered. He kissed her once more, quickly but with feeling, then mounted his horse as the children came running back with their map. After one final round of goodbyes, he rode away, turning once at the edge of the property to wave. Katherine stood with an arm around each child, watching until he disappeared from view. The silver star was warm in her hand, a tangible reminder of his promise. She might still carry many burdens, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone beneath their weight. The months that followed brought changes to the Davis ranch and to Katherine herself. With the remainder of the reward money, she hired a ranch hand to help with the cattle, easing her workload considerably. The autumn harvest was better than expected, and she was able to lay in ample stores for the winter ahead. Adam's letters arrived regularly, full of news from Helena and affectionate inquiries about her and the children. He wrote separately to Emma and Daniel as well, sending Emma a new sketch pad and pencils, and Daniel a small carved horse that looked remarkably like his favorite mount. True to his word, Adam returned in late October, just before the first snowfall. He stayed for 4 days, days filled with shared work, laughter, and increasingly open affection. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, Katherine and Adam would sit before the fire, talking late into the night, learning each other's hopes and fears, dreams and disappointments. On his final evening, as they sat close together on the sofa, Adam took her hand in his. "I've been thinking," he began, "about the future, our future." Katherine looked up at him, her heart quickening. "What about it?" "I don't want to rush you," he said carefully. "I know you need time and the children need time to be sure about this about us, but I also want you to know that my feelings haven't changed. If anything, they've grown stronger." "Mine too," Katherine admitted softly. Adam's face lit up with hope. "Then I'd like to court you properly, Katherine Davis, with the intention of asking for your hand when the time is right." Despite knowing this moment had been approaching, Katherine felt a fluttering of nerves mixed with joy. "Adam, are you certain? My life is here on this land." "The children's roots are here. I'm not asking you to," he interrupted gently. "In fact, I have news. The governor has appointed a new circuit judge for this region. He needs a marshal to accompany him on his rounds." Adam's eyes held hers. The position would be based in Silver Creek. Katherine's breath caught. Silver Creek was just 30 miles away, close enough to visit regularly, even in winter. "You'd consider taking it?" "I've already accepted," Adam said. "I start after the new year." Joy bubbled up inside her, but caution made her ask, "What about your career?" "Helena is where the opportunities are." Adam shook his head. "Helena is where political appointments happen, yes, but real law work, the kind that matters to ordinary people, happens in places like Silver Creek. Besides," he added with a smile, "a man nearing 40 starts thinking about putting down roots, finding a place to call home. And you think that could be here? This life," Katherine gestured to the modest farmhouse around them. "It's not exciting, Adam. It's hard work and early mornings and worry over cattle prices and rainfall. It's a life with purpose," Adam replied. "With people who matter, that's all I've ever wanted." His hand tightened around hers. "Say yes, Katherine, let me court you as you deserve. Let me show you that we can build something good together." Looking into his earnest face, Katherine felt the last of her doubts melt away. The road ahead might not be simple or straightforward, but they would travel it together. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, Adam." His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, Katherine rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with more than just survival, a future bright with possibility and love. True to his word, Adam moved to Silver Creek in January of 1880. The town welcomed its new marshal enthusiastically, and Adam quickly established himself as fair but firm in upholding the law. His duties with the circuit judge kept him traveling part of each month, but his new base meant he could spend most weekends at the Davis Ranch. Katherine watched with joy as her children blossomed under Adam's steady influence. Daniel, especially, thrived with a man's guidance, proudly showing off new skills in riding and ranching whenever Adam visited. Emma, initially more reserved, gradually came to trust that Adam's presence in their lives was permanent, not fleeting. By spring, it was clear to everyone in Silver Creek and the surrounding homesteads that Marshal Calloway was courting the widow Davis with serious intentions. Katherine endured the knowing looks and occasional gossip with dignity, secure in the knowledge that what she and Adam were building was right for them both. On a warm evening in May, with apple blossoms scenting the air, Adam asked Katherine to marry him. They were sitting on the porch swing he had built for her birthday, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant orange and gold. "I know it's only been a few months since I moved to Silver Creek," he said, taking her hand. "And if you need more time, I understand, but Katherine, I love you. I love your children. I want us to be a family officially, permanently." Katherine's heart swelled with emotion. "Adam, are you sure? Marriage to a widow with 2 children, a struggling ranch, a family," he corrected gently. "A home, everything I never knew I wanted until I met you." From his pocket, he produced a small ring, a simple gold band with a modest diamond that caught the fading sunlight. "Katherine Davis, will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of happiness blurred her vision as she nodded. "Yes, Adam, yes, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of shared joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges all faced together. They were married in the Silver Creek Church on a perfect June day, with Emma as flower girl and Daniel proudly serving as ring bearer. The townspeople and neighboring ranchers filled the small building to capacity, their presence a testament to the respect both bride and groom had earned in the community. Katherine wore a new dress of ivory, silk her one extravagance, ordered from a catalog with money she'd saved from selling extra butter and eggs. Adam, resplendent in his best suit, watched her walk down the aisle with an expression of such love and pride that it brought tears to the eyes of even the most stoic attendees. The reception was held at the Davis Ranch, now freshly painted and sporting a new front porch thanks to Adam's carpentry skills. Tables laden with food stretched across the yard, and a small band played as couples danced beneath paper lanterns strung from tree to tree. As twilight deepened into night, Adam found Katherine standing apart from the festivities, gazing up at the stars. "Having regrets already, Mrs. Calloway?" he teased, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Katherine leaned back against his solid warmth. "Not one," she replied truthfully. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in a year. Last summer I was drowning in debt, afraid of losing everything, carrying burdens I could barely manage alone." Adam's arms tightened around her. "And now?" She turned in his embrace, looking up into the face of the man who had transformed her life not by rescuing her, but by showing her she had never needed rescuing, only support, partnership, love. "Now I know I'm not alone, that I never have to be alone again." "Never," Adam affirmed, bending to kiss her with a tenderness that still made her knees weak after all these months. "Your burdens are my burdens, Katherine. Your joys are my joys. That's what marriage means, sharing the load, whatever comes." As they rejoined the celebration, Katherine caught sight of Emma and Daniel, laughing as they attempted to teach some of the town children a game they'd invented. Her heart full to bursting with love for her family, both old and new, she sent a silent thanks to Thomas. He had given her the courage to carry on after his death, to build a life for their children against all odds. And now, in finding love again, she hadn't betrayed his memory but honored it by embracing the happiness he would have wished for her. Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. Adam maintained his position as Silver Creek's marshal, but arranged his duties with the circuit judge to ensure he was home more often than not. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts, and by the end of summer, they had added 10 new head of cattle to their growing herd. In the fall, Katherine discovered she was expecting a child, news that brought tears of joy to Adam's eyes and excited speculation from Emma and Daniel about whether they would have a brother or sister. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months, with Katherine glowing with health and happiness despite the occasional discomforts. On a bright May morning in 1881, almost exactly a year after Adam's proposal, Katherine gave birth to a son they named James Thomas Calloway, James for Adam's father, Thomas in honor of Katherine's first husband. The baby had Adam's dark hair and Katherine's green eyes, a perfect blend of them both. As Katherine nursed their newborn son that evening, Adam sat beside her on the bed, one arm around her shoulders, his free hand gently stroking the infant's downy head. "I never thought I could be this happy," he confessed, his voice hushed with wonder. "That I could have this, a family, a home, a wife I adore, children to raise and love." Katherine smiled up at him, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain all she felt. Nor I, she admitted. After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. That all I could hope for was to survive, to see the children grown. She leaned against his shoulder. You changed everything, Adam. We changed it together, he corrected gently. You were never weak, Katherine, never incapable. You just carried too many burdens alone for too long. She thought of that day nearly 2 years ago when a dust-covered deputy marshal had ridden into her yard and unwittingly changed the course of her life. I'm glad you were stubborn enough to keep coming back, she said with a smile, even when I tried to push you away. Adam chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her side. Calloway men are known for their persistence. It's our best quality. His expression grew serious as he gazed at his son. That and knowing a good thing when we see it. And what do you see now? Katherine asked softly. Adam's eyes, warm with love, met hers. Everything I ever wanted, he replied simply. Everything I'll spend the rest of my life cherishing and protecting. Outside their window, the Montana sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, a fitting backdrop to the tableau of love and family within. Katherine Davis Calloway, once a woman who carried too many burdens alone, now rested secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, she would face them with Adam by her side. The weight would be shared, the joys multiplied, the sorrows divided. She was never alone. And she never would be again.